Thank you.
So it's about time you got back here to give us an update on this Carter Page thing. I understand you and the guys in the conclave have been to every rock store in your area buying up the shungite. What's that all about?
Well, you know what that's about. We did a talk on shungite.
Well, it's a teaser for everybody else who hasn't heard about shungite yet.
Well, it's an antidote to 5G, and it has carbon 60 in it. And so our little talk with John Barnwell reached all the way to the, I forget what it is, the
Buckminster Fuller folks?
yeah, to his like niece or
Air?
something,
Yeah.
who then contacted us. So yes, I guess people are going out buying shungite because it actually can protect you from, radio frequency radiation.
You know, if you're a new listener to our channel and you feel like, whoa, what are these people talking about? I missed something. Yeah, you did. You've missed a lot. But don't worry about it. We didn't catch up with the House of Cards until it was in season 7, so we just binge watched. So if you want to listen to some of these audios, I have them in playlist. One is called the Betsy and Thomas playlist, and the other one is called AIM Insights. And if you go into those playlists, you can play from, this point backwards. They're in chronological order. You can catch up on some of these things, especially about this 5G and, those fun Lionel interviews. And anyway, just want to help folks out on navigating the site. But you were up in arms today about Carter Page. Couldn't wait to get to the microphone. What's up with that?
Well, first off, a shout out to Sundance at the Conservative Treehouse. Again, great research those people are doing. Sundance, if you're a person, if you're a collective, thank you. You are so point on in this area of your investigation. And you reminded people and put it all in one place, which we had known, but when you put it in place in perspective with the fact that Carter Page is out there now talking to every news agency, he's all over the news, and he looks like a scared rabbit, and he can't seem to answer questions very accurately because he can't seem to remember which story he's telling. We're going to tell you the truth, because the truth is clear. It has recently come out. Again, thank you whoever leaks these court documents, like the court documents where we have, the Uranium One FBI undercover agent, or basically they're called undercover employee, being a person who revealed what Uranium One was all about. He still is under a gag order. Well, that's basically who Carter Page is, you see. Here's who Carter Page is. He was picked up in 2012, and they accused him of being an associate of Russians. And he said, oh, no. So he said, okay, then we're going to use you. We want you to penetrate these people who we know are spies, these Russian spies, one through the United Nations, another one through the Russian. Basically, he's a administrative agent for commodities here in New York. And so Carter Page said, okay, I talked with the guy twice. What are you trying to say to me? Of course, they blackmail people. And they got Carter Page, a scared little guy who had a one-man shop, literally. His company was him. And he was trying to break into the market. He'd been a Merrill Lynch trader in Moscow, trading oil futures. Great thing to do. And so his deal was to break into, like everyone wants to break into either Rosneft or Gazprom. So anyway, he's talking with this guy who's playing like he's a banker. And of course, Carter Page in 2012 is playing like he is a bigwig investor. And that's it. The police, the FBI pick him up. They turn him. They make him an undercover agent. They make him give his thesis, some binders that he uses to hand out to his students. He's also a teacher at universities. And these binders had in them microphones. So he gave them to this guy who was a Russian posing as a banker. He shared it with two other guys who were basically spies because they worked for the UN and they worked for the Russian government here in America. Hello. Really? And you didn't know they were spies? Nothing could happen to those two Russians because they have immunity. But the one guy got caught. His name is Yevgeny Burakov. And he is the one that became pseudo friends. He met a few times. And then later, once Carter Page became an FBI paid undercover employee. This is all in the court documents.
This is important. Listen, he was an FBI employee, Carter Page.
who was sent to the Trump camp.
FBI employee who was sent to the Trump camp. Because, see, all the headlines are kind of jumbling that up, and you're never going to hear this from the propaganda media.
Well, you're not going to hear it explained so that it makes sense to you. You're going to hear Carter Page on every show say different things. You're going to hear he's under... Wait, if Carter Page was the source of the dossier, and the source of the dossier is the real Trump-Russian collusion, then why hasn't Robert Mueller charged Carter Page with the crime?
Because Robert Mueller is as crooked as all of them.
Because Robert Mueller, James Comey, that you might as well, that's a two-headed monster. It's one being. And of course, I don't even know that they have questioned Carter Page. I've never saw that
Why
leak.
would they? He was a former FBI employee.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry I keep hitting that home, but does it get any worse than this, Thomas?
He worked with the FBI from 2012 till 2016. May of 2016, they finally settled the court case. It finally settled the whole thing. It was actually tried in 2015, where he was the star witness, and he was called male number one. But in the court case, he was called UCE number one. That means undercover employee, and it explains it there, and it describes him in great detail, and describes his business, and describes what he did, and described the binders, and described who he talked with, described it all. And then he came out later, Carter Page, in his testimony. He had multiple testimony behind closed doors with the Congress and the Senate, and he said that, and those have been released, part of those conversations have been released, plus he's come out and said it. And he's basically said that he worked for the FBI to go after these Russians. So he was an American entrapping Russian spies in America. He wasn't a Russian spy.
Working for the FBI.
But because when he gave these binders to these three Russian guys, one who did get convicted, two, as I say, had immunity, and they did not get convicted, they went into a room they thought was secure, and they talked all about it, and they called Carter Page a complete idiot. And they laughed and laughed about the fact that they told Carter Page they were going to get him a big percentage of Gazprom, the largest gas company in Russia. And as you know, Kazakhstan goes through, So you're talking the largest oil deals in the world, and he's going to get a huge percent of it. In the dossier, the whole dossier is predicated upon the fact.
I like it. They called him a wackadoodle.
Yes, the people he worked for generally called him a wackadoodle in multiple places that he worked for, and they kicked him out. He was a complete nutcase. He was told by Comey. I'll go back to that in a minute. Let's just focus
boss.
Let's just go focus. Don't get me off in the woods with why Comey went to him to begin with.
No, we want to hear the woods.
Oh, Comey went to him because in 2015, when the breach happened in the Democratic National Committee's server, they had already, and then this came out in the WikiLeaks, which were actually not, they were leaks, they were breaches from Seth Rich and perhaps others, but they were certainly not Russian hacks. So when they found out the breaches had happened and what segments had been stolen, they knew they were in hot water, because in those comments in the emails, they said they were discussing the research they had done that found that Hillary Clinton will not win because she is tainted by the Russians, and particularly the Russian One scandal, which will come out because of the trial that I just mentioned, which they put a gag order on the very FBI UCE undercover employee, which still can't speak. He still can't speak. Still not allowed to speak. No one, Jeff Sessions, has not lifted the gag order and let him speak to the public. I don't even know if he's still alive. I suspect if the gag order has been lifted, that he's probably dead. I haven't heard anything. I heard a rumor the gag order was going to be lifted. You can bet your booties that Carter Page has a gag order on him for everything that came out during that investigation, which we now get the records from, where the Russian was convicted for spying. He wasn't spying. He didn't register as a Russian agent. Had he simply sent in some forms, he could have done everything he did legally. He got no illegal forms from Carter Page. Carter Page is a bozo. He had nothing to give them. This was a setup by Comey using one of the people that he basically had captured and entrapped, because he knew that Carter Page regularly went back to Russia. He also knew that he'd worked there. He knew that he had contacts with the university there and that he was a professor there, and they liked him, and so he'd go give talks there and he'd make money. And so they're going to use this against the Trump team. So as soon as they found out,
they're using him as an asset.
Correct. He's a double spy.
But
I'll
he
explain
is
it
an
in a minute.
employee of the FBI.
Correct. While he was a volunteer campaign member to the Trump team, where he never went to a single meeting. His name was on one list of foreign advisors. Those 5 people were going to have a meeting, and I heard him say on the news yesterday, that he didn't go to the first meeting, and went on Laura Ingraham. He said he was in Hawaii. He didn't even go to the meeting.
Yeah, so that was what got you going. We saw that Laura Ingraham interview with Carter, and it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how people do it. You have to watch all the lies on the media and then on your own try to figure all this out. So I'm glad we have you, Thomas.
I watched it, and Laura might as well have been banging her head against the wall because she couldn't understand anything. She kept interrupting him because he couldn't give a straight answer, and he looked like he had just wet his pants because he is not adept at this. This is the reason the man was poor, and he was out begging and volunteering to the Trump campaign at the time when the Trump campaign, everybody thought he would die before it would even go anywhere. He didn't volunteer. He was ordered to go there by Comey, his boss, just like Comey ordered Felix Sater to take the Trump team to Russia twice as a setup, just like Felix Sater set up the meeting with the Russian lawyer who the State Department, the female Russian lawyer who the State Department allowed into this country just so she could meet with Donald Jr. and Jared and Paul Manafort, who they already had been spying on for 5 years. Just like they made sure they never told Trump that they had years-long investigations in 4 or 5 different departments, intelligence agencies against Paul Manafort. Just like they did not tell that Michael Flynn was already under investigation through the FISA court. Just like they did not tell, and this is the part that gets me so upset, I hope the listeners don't mind that I yell. I'm going to try to calm myself down. As I said, the only person on the news, not even the conclave, agreed with me that they didn't need an international FISA Court 702 warrant because the FBI in a counterintelligence investigation does whatever they want. The Inspector General found the FISA Court for the domestic FBI had turned in no documents, not one single record of anyone they ever asked for permission to get warrant on. So why would in October 21st, 2016, after the Trump team had already put a cease and desist order on Carter Page to get the heck away from their team because he's a wackadoodle, he's a nutcase, he's an idiot, and he's a setup, and they knew he was a setup, get away from us, months before, that's on the record, Comey, John Carlin from the Department of Justice along with Loretta Lynch, and John Carlin working through the Department of Justice National Security Department, and Comey working through Bill William Priesthap through the Counterintelligence Department, were able to fly under the cover of a national security investigation called a counterintelligence that started in July 2006 with George Papadopoulos. But at the same time, they started long before that. As soon as they found out in December that their weak point was the Russians, they had to create the Russian cover. They had to throw it all on Trump. So they pulled out every Russian agent that Comey had, including Franklin Farrar, who wrote for the Slate. Remember, in July, Franklin Farrar let it slip too early that he'd spent a fortune figuring out by accident a computer connection between the Trump Towers and Alpha Bank in Russia, where these 3 Russian oligarchs were sending money to Trump 5 years before he started running, and it was through Carter Page, who was being paid off with 16% of Gazprom's entire income for a year. That's $11 billion.
Also an employee of the FBI.
Thank you very much. And that Michael Cohen also met with them in Prague, though Michael Cohen can prove he never went to Prague. And then General Flynn was accused of what he was accused of, and we've pointed out why. So Comey used, first off, from the get-go, a Russian he'd already arrested, turned to being an active undercover employee for FBI for years, and then the CIA picked up on him and brought in his dad, and his dad holds all the crypto keys to almost everything in America, business-wise or military. Someone should look into that. But anyway, Comey called in his first guy because the Democratic National Committee met, and on that committee was Alexandria Chalupa. She's a Ukrainian, a Russian Ukrainian.
Let's not go into the Ukrainian woods because that one's huge.
Comey said to them at that moment, well, let's just get some dirt on Paul Manafort because he'll never get through the election without Paul Manafort. He'll have to use the lobbying firm that's the opposite of the Podesta firm. He's going to have to get Paul Manafort. And he'll get Roger Stone. We'll take down Roger Stone. Somebody's got to take down. And they did. Roger Stone's still in a lawsuit with the president. The most insane lawsuit I've ever heard of. Because he talked to Guccifer 2.0 in an open text, which he published to the world. And because he talked to Guccifer 2.0, Roger Stone's a Russian. That's why Roger Stone was knocked out of being the campaign manager for Trump. So what did he take? His partner in Stone, Manafort, Black, and Kelly.
But who is Guccifer 2.0?
He is a FBI Comey agent. Are you kidding?
Well, that's what...
I've said this from the beginning. And Dmitry Alperovitch, who is the friend of Alexandria Chalupa on the Atlantic Council. Mm-hmm. Alexandria got the $27 million fake dossier to go against Paul Manafort like that, and she sprung it too early. These things aren't supposed to be sprung. They're supposed to be sprung right before the election, so all you hear is the last bad news, and you go, I loved Trump before, and now I hate him. He has prostitutes pee on him in Moscow. That's what people were supposed to be saying, or the one of 100 other stories. Okay,
it was probably Bill Clinton.
So they blew it. They showed their October surprises early. I've said this again and again. So Franklin Farrar magically finds this connection and proves beyond a shadow of a doubt with beautiful charts that must have cost millions of dollars to make, and the research and all the professors. He went out to professors to prove that this had to be a real connection. And in the dossier, it says that the 3 Russian oligarchs pay Trump through this Trump Tower server, and that's why you see so many pings. It's money going to Trump, and that was arranged through Carter Page, who's getting $11 billion for doing this, and Michael Cohen's going there to be in between to make sure the money gets to him, and later down the line, they threw George Papadopoulos in there so they could have their own separate, starting with the CIA and then turning into an FBI counterintelligence investigation against George Papadopoulos, which we've talked about before, completely fake. We're talking about... So, the people who went after George Papadopoulos were Comey's other agents. The guy that he met in London, the Putin's niece that he had sex with in Italy. Why is it that Christopher Steele, the other Comey agent, a British ex-agent, MI6...
Also paid by the FBI.
Paid by the FBI in London and in Italy. Seems to be a pattern. Okay, so then Christopher Steele is one of Comey's agents. Felix Sater is one of his agents. Carter Page is one of his agents. We can prove this. The court documents show, and the Carter Page came out, and even today, right, with Laura Ingraham, she asked him.
I know.
She asked him the question, well, they say that you're a Russian spy, and he completely freaks out. I thought he was going to wet his pants, and he goes, I'm not a spy. No, when I worked for Comey, it was because of that guy. I just talked to that guy twice, and I didn't do any of that, and I'm going to change subjects now. He didn't tell the truth, which is now out there, which his binders were used, and they were taken all the way back to Russia so that they supposedly got to listen to the SVR, the Russian CIA, through his magical binders. In the binders was nothing but his stuff he gave to his students. Nothing was in there. He had been used. He didn't even know it. And then he was sicked on the Trump team, and he's like, oh, gung-ho. But what's Comey telling him? Hammer Obama. Say Obama's evil. Say democracy's bad. Go to Russia and give a fiery speech that makes Trump look bad and say you're on his team. And that's what he did. And Trump said, get the snot away from me. I don't know you. I never spoke to you. I was never in a room with you. I don't know who you are.
He's an employee of the FBI.
Oh, thank you. He's
I'm
James Comey, spy.
Yes.
Just like Franklin Farrar worked for Slate.
James Comey sent his spies in to cause all these problems with our president.
I said from the get-go that as soon as they get GPS Fusion's bank records, they will see that they paid the media, and that has now come out. Comey had Larry Strzok and Bruce Orr from the Department of Justice.
Larry Strzok.
Larry Strzok worked for Bill
It's
Priestap.
Peter Strzok.
Sorry, Peter
And Larry
Strzok.
Summers is the guy that's over on the other side at Harvard.
Lisa
it's hard
Page.
keeping these names.
Lisa,
When I was a
yes.
little girl, Thomas, I used to run home at 3 o'clock and with my nanny, that was my grandmother, we would watch As the World Turns, and I just loved it, all that character development, intrigue. It is nothing compared to Untangling the Swamp.
So if we're digressing, I'm going to digress to
Okay.
months ago when you and I sat here, and what did we say? We can name, I've got to back up because I'm going to scream this.
Up.
We can name the Comey criminals that are in that circle that he refers to that all have to go down, and we named them Bill Priestap.
Yes.
And we also named that Bill Priestap name would never come up because he's counterintelligence, national security. So we said, and I said, and no one stood with me, maybe you did, when I said his underling, whoever is directly under him, is going to take the fall. And then I said, Chief Counsel James Baker must go down. Because they did with this Department of Justice, John Carlin must go down. Both of them are the chief lawyers for those departments. They have left. I said Ribicki was tainted because he left. We said that Andrew McCabe had to go because he was tainted 6 ways to Sunday, and they were all in on not only rewriting Comey's exoneration for Hillary before the investigation even began, changing the investigation from a criminal investigation to a matter, and then exonerating her even after the Huma Abedin espionage stuff came out, which is, that still has to be tried. No one's ever even looked at that. And we know that those computers were not destroyed. Trump grabbed them when he fired Comey.
And Comey was out of town, so he went into the office and went into the secret rooms because, folks, James Comey's brother was the architect or engineer behind the building of the FBI headquarters.
Correct.
He put in secret rooms where James and all the dirty players can hide the computers and the Blackberries, or for you, the Blueberries, and hide them and use them for blackmail against everybody. But Trump trumped them, and he went and got them.
He has them.
Yeah, he has them.
It's just a matter of time, folks. So we sat right here and we named those people. And we also said they were bunk buddies. And if they weren't bunk buddies, then they got some woman in there with them, and that's Lisa Page. And lo and behold, Peter Strzok was strucking Lisa Page. And then the Strzok Page texts, 50,000 sex texts, cannot be turned over by the FBI or the DOJ, their boss, because Stephen Boyd, who works underneath Rod Rosenstein, and obviously doesn't, and I don't... Has anyone shown Jeff Sessions to his office at the Department of Justice? Does he have a phone line yet? Anyway, so you follow this back and you see we even named the people at the Department of Justice who were part of this we called bunk buddies, right? That's exactly who the dossier went after because they signed a FISA Title I. That means that they both confirmed that Carter Page is a Russian spy, period. That gives them the broadest surveillance and the broadest powers to do whatever they want to anyone in his upstream. That means anyone he talks to or ever did or ever does, anyone in his downstream, anyone he ever talked to. And then they have queries and about queries, which means they can put in President Trump because he claims he was on the team and get President Trump's telephone call from the Oval Office. This has all been revealed by Vault 7 and the tools that they have been in place and used by, which is just amazing to me, the Board of Broadcasting Governors. And we got to hear Carter Page state
said that
what
on
the only people
show.
who state this is the
It's
anonymous
us.
patriots.
We have said that forever, and people said, you guys are just wackadoodle.
We're wackadoodles.
We're conspiracy theorists, and go, no, who's the conspiracy theorist out there? People like Schiff, who still think that there's Russian collusion, that's a conspiracy theory for sure.
No, he's got something that eats his soul up. Just look at his face. But anyway, so Carter Page is the real spy, but he's the FBI spy on Trump. And because he has Russian connections, he was supposed to be the Russian collusion, and this money was already going to Trump. And Carter Page was getting his part, which was $11 billion. And when Carter Page is asked about this, he completely freaks out because he can't remember which lies he has to tell. Remember, he's probably under a gag order from this court case that we're talking about, which you can read the proceedings where the descriptions of him couldn't be any clearer. And he then says he is that person. But then on news, he can't say that. So he just continues to lie. This is more attention than the boy can have. I predict that he won't be able to handle this. But anyway, so he did nothing for the Trump team. He certainly couldn't have made the connection between Putin and remember, Putin wanted Hillary to be in office. He already had the reset with her. He had the tech city. He had everything. He had some slight sanctions he could get rid of because they were just going after certain Russian oligarchs. And remember, anyone who does business with a Russian who's wealthy, who doesn't know they're part of the Russian mafia oligarch team, is stupid. And don't just go study what's going on there. That is what's about happening here. We almost had the KGB take over our White House. It's called the Rogue CIA. The KGB, their basic counterintelligence units and international security units, which of course Putin is, took over their country and turned it into oligarchs. Well, that's what happened here with Daddy Bush. The CIA, when it became the Rogue CIA, still having control with the White House, has basically become a counterintelligence operation against America. And this is the proof of it because Mueller, in his 12 years of doing it, and then Comey coming in and botching it, he had to be put in place to cover Hillary's crimes. So, going back, the second they knew the problem was Russia, Comey, like a Boy Scout, said, please let me help. I've told you a million times. There was a meeting in the White House with Obama there where Comey was there, and they discussed the election with Hillary there, and they said that Comey would write an op-ed piece that would take down Trump. And they said, you're insane. Don't do that. Well, he had already by then started his Russian October surprises, many of them because in July, when Franklin Foer's story already broke because he had to use millions of dollars to get the information he had and then to create the charts for the accusation. He was supposed to bring it out on October the 30th, but he blew it. He brought it out earlier, leaked it to the press, just like Christopher Steele, Comey's other agent in Britain, in the whole Trump dossier, which included included a whole bunch of his spies, which we will name. Not only Carter Page, it included, as we say, Felix Sater. It included there's another Russian spy who was in that meeting at Trump Towers who was actually an FBI informant. He's an asset, and he's the one who actually arranged the meeting so Felix wouldn't get caught. Then you got Franklin Foer, who put out the lies that would show that Trump was getting the money, the proof that he was getting the money. And then you had Christopher Steele, but Christopher Steele worked with who? All of GPS, Glenn Simpson, his whole team, all the liars from the Wall Street Journal, the yellow journalist.
Including his wife, Mary Jacoby.
Who bragged that don't blame this on Christopher Steele. My husband wrote all this opposition research on Trump. He just made it up. I watched him write it. That's what Mary Jacoby says about her husband, Glenn Simpson, GPS. Why? Because if they admit at all that Christopher Steele had anything to do with this is massive felony. This is actually treason because it wasn't only election rigging and then messing with the president-elect, but there was an attempt to overthrow a sitting president.
And they used foreign agents.
And we first know this as, first you know it as what I'm describing to you. Carter Page infiltrating the Trump camp so that it makes sense when all the allegations come out. They go, well, Carter Trump is in the Trump camp. Wait, Papadopoulos is in there. Wait, Flynn's in there. Wait. Oh, I don't care. He's bad. The dossier is true. I never saw the dossier. And here's, the only people saying this, I don't know why people don't just look at this and see it for what it is. Why did all of this happen? Because BuzzFeed put a copy out for us to read. And anyone who reads it knows it's fake and can check any of the details. There's not one single verified fact in it. And when Nunes was asked, are there any verifiable facts in the dossier? You know what he said? Is Trump a human? Is Russia a country?
Yeah, but
that's the only truths in it. There's no truths in it. Anyone who would think from the first moment there was any truth in it is an idiot.
Okay, but Thomas, I have to ask questions sometimes, So Yahoo News, Carter Page says right there in that video with Laura Ingraham, and since we've mentioned that several times, you guys, you'll find that down in the description box. I'll put the links. But he says in there that Yahoo News works for the Bureau of Broadcasting Governors, and I bet you will see that BuzzFeed does too. Because as we pointed out almost 2 years ago in our first major piece that we put out, was that it is legal to propagandize Americans. And if you don't know that, you're just waking up to this, I'll put that link down there. You should read that article.
Carter Page said it. And is her name Laura?
Laura Ingraham?
Mm-hmm. Laura agreed and said, yes, Board of Broadcasting Governors, yeah, we know. You're suing them because they're actually in control of what comes across Yahoo News, and also the subtlety that it was broadcast around the world. And he pointed out, the Voice of Europe and others all throughout the world, that he is the Russian spy. So it ruins all of his Russian connections for the rest of his life when he was trying to be a Russian good guy and bring Russian business to America. Even after being used to be a spy against the Russians, he was kind of hoping, because he's so naive and he's such a wackadoodle, he was still hoping he'd still have a reputation, which got ruined. So he's suing Yahoo News. But here's the deal. The 4-page Nunes memo says Yahoo News is being sued by Carter Page because Christopher Steele was the source of their report that said that Carter Page, when he went to Russia to give his lecture, met with the head of Rosneft, who he admitted on Laura Ingram's show that he did have a 10-second pleasantry as he walked by him in the hall, because he was one of the lecturers along with Carter Page himself, but he had no connection with him. He wished he did. Trump wishes he had all these connections. All the Trumps wish they had connections with Russians. Because it was the thing to do. All that oligarchic money coming out of there went to London. It went to Italy. That's why these connections always happen there. That's where the Russian oligarch money went. That's why Manafort went down. That's why Rick Grates went down. That's the oligarchic Russian money in Ukraine. When you say Ukraine, you say Russia. When you say Russia, you say Ukraine. When you say Alexandra Chalupa, she is now a Ukrainian who's a Russian. She was allowed into the country by the Kerry State Department, so she could do this setup with the Trump team to tell them that she had connections who could put them in contact with the 33,000 missing Hillary Clinton emails. Well, let's remember, the FBI said they lost them too.
Whoa. John Kerry was in on this too?
Well, who was the Secretary of State after Hillary Clinton?
I know that. So what I'm saying is...
Well, of course he had to be.
So you're talking about the FBI, the CIA, the State Department, and the Department of Justice are all working against us, we the people, and the president we elected.
Let me tell you something.
I know you're rolling your eyes, but sometimes I just have to take all those big, hairy thoughts you have and just say, real simply, folks, this is what it is.
I said this before, and I'll say it 1,000,000 trillion times. I have signed more security agreements than I can count. If I break them for the rest of my life, I go to jail for the rest of my life and all the money I could ever earn.
I know, that's why we open source everything.
Everyone who communicated in a non-secure line with Hillary Clinton when she was the Secretary of State committed a felony, broke their security agreements, and if they're in the military, committed treason. That includes Obama, who used a fake name and still communicated with her on a non-secure lines, again, a felony crime. And everyone else in the State Department and in the Justice Department and the FBI, they all did. So the second they did this, they all became complicit. That's why they won't turn her in, because they're all guilty. All of them. And she had what? Thousands of them who her own CIA, who created the dark net.
She knew this too. She knew as soon
Are
as
you
she
kidding?
No, she knew that as soon as she set up a private email and emailed people back and forth that she was getting them to commit these crimes.
And admitted, and the note came out recently, got from Judicial Watch, and other places, was released that she says that she knows that all of her State Department, all of her information is on her server and that it is not secure. She states this. Intent.
Yeah, because now nobody's going to prosecute her.
It was more than intent. It was part of pay to play. It was part of the espionage. It was part of the espionage that reached into the reached into the Democratic National Committee. It reached in through Debbie Wasserman Schultz and through Pelosi and the DCCC. That's the reason the fake Guccifer 2.0. Comey went to Guccifer. Let me just lay a few other things here on the line.
Lay it on.
A few other spies. But wait, I didn't finish the story. There's a part of this I didn't finish, which is so crucial. Carter Page was told to do this and told to be the nutcase, and it didn't matter because even after he was kicked off the team that he was never on, they got the ability to say he is a full-on spy, that's why I'm unmasking. They used Carter Page in the skiff White House. And of course they unmasked everyone else because they were looking for what General Flynn was doing, what Manafort was doing, what Gates was doing, what Trump was doing, what Jared was doing. They were looking at everybody. The opposition was run by Obama himself with the help of Eric Schmidt and the U.S. Digital Service directly from the White House.
And Dude Zuckerberg, don't forget Dude.
Well, he did all the algorithms.
Facebook stuff.
He's an idiot. He does whatever they say to him. Yeah, so that's a PSYOP CIA thing that is very effective, and we now know it, and it's crumbling. Right. Don't let your children on it, and don't let your children on these weaponized devices. If you use these, use them for higher consciousness. That's the antidote. But anyway, going back, Carter Page then went to Russia and made the most inflammatory lecture you possibly could so he'd get in the news so that he could say, I'm a Trump team member, and I'm saying no democracy, and I'm against American regime change, and I'm against Obama and democracy. Okay? He did that on purpose so that they could get their dossier, their fake dossier, which he had Comey, McCabe, Dana Bronte, and John Carlin, and Sally Yates all signed off repeatedly on the initial and the 3 reinstatements, which are 3 months apiece, which makes it a year. That means they continued to surveil Trump for a year from July 21st, 2016 until July 21st, 2017, even though Carter Page had nothing to do with Trump.
But they're spying on a president.
No, they're unseating a president. Yes, they're spying. Excuse me, you're right. And they're attempting to unseat a president.
It is an overthrow of the United States government.
Struck Page text messages, said, oh, all the things we put in place might not work. We need to pull the insurance policy out. That was the dossier. They already had the intelligence report. They had already leaked through Comey using Strzok and the counterintelligence department of the FBI, met with Glenn Simpson, met with Bruce Orr, and met with CNN, Yahoo News, Washington Post, the New York Times, all the most evil ones did not, and then met separately with Mother Jones, but they did not meet with BuzzFeed.
Oh, they didn't? Not yet.
No. That's why I say whoever leaked it to BuzzFeed is the imbecile who blew the whole thing for them. I want to thank them. I say it's McCain's assistant, what's his name, who works for the McCain Institute.
Okay, so that's where McCain fits in.
Yeah, and that's why he came out of his coma to yell that he's a Democrat the other day. So, no, that's the truth.
I know.
He doesn't even care what the issue is. Tell me what the Democrats believe, and I'll yell it louder than they do. That's why, because he gets his insider from Raytheon. Every bomb he drops, he becomes richer. So, Comey had, when he realized, okay, do you get the picture on Carter Page? Or do you want something else filled in? Because I got so many details. How many details do you want?
Well, I tell you what, if you're tired of listening to us, jump off. If you want to listen to more, stay on. So go for it.
Okay. So, what Devin Nunes did was brilliant. He named, I think it's 7, and implied another 20 or so people with showing the dates that they got a fake, over and over and over again, fake federal warrant to consider Carter Page a spy. He's not smart enough to spy on his own cat. Okay? No. He was used. So was Felix Sater. I can go into that. He's a Russian, by the way, and his dad is one of the top Russian bosses in New York City. So we're not really looking at Russians here. They love the Russians. We're looking at how can we implicate idiots or very powerful people like Paul Manafort with Trump saying they're somehow connected to Russians. So here they try to say, oh, Russia, Manafort, Ukraine. No. The Party of Regions is Nazi. It is anti-Russia. And those are the three oligarchs who put the money into the Cyprus account that Manafort drew out, he and Rick Gates, and that's what they're getting in trouble for. Those aren't Russians. So where's the Russians? Oh, that would be Larry Podesta entering the White House 114 times during Obama's administration as a lobbyist for Russian banks, especially for Leonid Wait
a minute. You said Larry Podesta.
Oh, I'm sorry. I always say something wrong.
Well, which one? We got two Podestas.
Tony and his brother.
Okay, Tony and John.
John. Okay, I always called him Larry. I love that name, Larry. I want to keep attributing it to people.
I know. But I just want... Now, let's go back there.
I might have attributed it to women sometimes, too.
Which Podesta?
It was Larry. I said it again. It was John.
All right, so John Podesta...
No. It was his brother.
Tony.
Tony came in 114 times. John was already there. He was a chief counselor.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so...
Wait. It's amazing. People forget this.
Yeah.
John Podesta controlled the White House. He controlled Obama. Now, it's true that Valerie Jarrett was his handler, and so was Michael Obama. But no, the boss was John Podesta.
And the Muslim Brotherhood.
Remember, John Podesta said to George Soros, okay, since you've given us $4 billion, we're going to let Obama be first like you want, but Hillary gets to be second, so she gets a second 8 years. And he says yes, and he gave $6 billion to the Democratic National Committee, but he did it in sneaky ways. We've talked about this before. It doesn't matter. The point is he bought it. The Democratic Party was bought and paid for, and Comey is the one who usually protects the Democrats, and Mueller will protect both, but he likes the Republicans better. And so it's all, they play this game in the Department of Justice back and forth. Whoever's the head of it is usually as crooked as a dog's hind leg. And Robert Mueller is the most crooked, and I can go on and on and on. So Robert Mueller's investigation, what was it called? I want to keep reiterating this. At first, they called it the Trump operation. Then they called it the Secret Society. Then they called it, and then they called it the Mueller investigation, which has always been a counterintelligence investigation. The counterintelligence investigation started in July 2016, as far as I know, morphed into the Mueller investigation. It's the same exact people. It's the dossier. It's the same things, except George Papadopoulos, who was also brought in and accused of lying. Well, he didn't know he was being taped. So they repeated to him surveillance, and he got a couple words wrong. So that's why he might as well be gagged. He got a plea bargain if he would be quiet. Oh, that's right. Let me repeat this. People don't believe this. Look it up. 2016, the counterintelligence investigation using George Papadopoulos started. He was not taken into custody for questioning until 1 year later, July 2017. So that counterintelligence investigation continued that entire time, and they didn't even investigate or question the person who they got. That was an international FISA warrant. So when they got that, they also got connections to Flynn and his Turkey connections and so on and so forth. And Flynn did make some mistakes because he didn't register as a foreign agent. Eventually, Podesta and John, both after the fact, after the Mueller investigation questioned them, filed as foreign agents. Manafort and Gates were not allowed to, and neither was Michael Flynn. Now, Michael Flynn is demanding, as I said, as we said, some of us said, thank you very much, that Michael Flynn will get off because he will ask the charges to be dropped because the star witness against him was Peter Strzok, who is also the star, who's also the person who questioned Hillary and rewrote Comey's exoneration.
No, he invited her in for tea and chatting.
There you go. So Peter Strzok was the single investigator who questioned Flynn, who wrote down a 302, and Flynn was charged with lying about a 302 report. That would have been Peter Strzok's report. And it would have been his own lies And of course, it didn't agree with what Michael Flynn said. So Michael Flynn had to take the plea bargain because they were going after his son. Remember, Trump allowed crazy nuts to volunteer for the Trump team. He didn't care. He needed all the help he could get, and not many people were volunteering. That's how Carter Page got in. But Carter Page got in because of Sam Clovis. Highly recommended him at the last second. Remember when Trump was, they said, who is second command of ISIS? And Trump looked at him like, what are you talking about? I have no idea who the second in command of ISIS is.
That's not his job to know that.
So they said,
detail.
oh, you have no foreign policy. So within a few days, they got 5 names, and Carter Page was one of those names.
Okay.
He had volunteered. He was never in a single meeting ever. He never talked to Trump. Trump didn't even know who he was. Trump once read his name off of the list of 5.
So any concluding remarks?
Oh, concluding. Please don't let me conclude. No, you have to hear this.
Okay.
How many Comey agents were they?
Oh my gosh, it sounds like all of Washington.
Who was the number one Comey agent to cover for the Russian supposed hacking of the DNC? You tell them the name.
Dmitry Alperovitch.
Yeah!
I just love saying that because we nailed him early on. We said, there's your man. And boy, do you see, he is nowhere around.
We knew the second that one company was
Blew
given
me away who his dad is.
a private company,
Michael Alperovitch.
CrowdStrike. Yes.
CrowdStrike.
CrowdStrike was given.
Listen.
He was the only person ever allowed. What happened was Comey called him in because he'd been used before because he was a Comey agent. He'd already been arrested. He was used by Comey for about 4 years before he went to the fake, basically, CIA, John McAfee virus company. And he was one of the top Russian hackers in this country. So Comey turned him to his side, turned him to McAfee. Then he started his own company. And for 5 years, that's who Obama used almost exclusively. He came in under Comey's request and put the Russian footprints in there. And then in April came out and said, oh, look, Russian footprints.
This is really cool little backstory. When the conclave was just forming and we were trying, well, Trump doesn't know it, but we volunteered to be on his team. And we're trying to help with some citizen intelligence reports. I asked Thomas, I said, well, we got to find out where this Russian hacking came in from. And he said, yeah. And so we were reading all the articles and I saw that name CrowdStrike. And it just kind of pinged with me a little bit. And I said, Thomas, this name CrowdStrike, it sounds like a up and start entrepreneur type company. If I were going to look deeper, what would I look for? And Thomas says, look for the Russians. See what Russians are behind it. So I did, and I started researching the internet and finally found their board of directors. And so I started naming the board of directors, and of course the first name in alphabetical order is Alperovitch, and I named that, and Thomas says, bingo, that's it, go for him. And that's how we found out who the Russian hacker was.
What did it take you, 5 seconds?
Well, it also is you have to know the right questions to ask. So everything we do is open source, but many times we don't know what we want to ask.
Then we found out that his dad was a fake Russian nuclear scientist who came into the country and instantaneously got the highest job in cryptology of anyone in the country, either military or corporate, and basically went from one top company to the next, centralized, very centralized, like the DIA. They went straight to the core computers, and he wrote the crypto codes, one man. And his son is the Russian spy that came over and was the Russian hacker inside of America. He came with his dad. And they had a company for a while, and then all of a sudden, his dad just became the top dog in America. Anyway, let's go back for a second.
Okay.
Now, that is a spy. That is a Russian spy. Dmitry Alperovitch was Comey's agent. He knew Alexandra Chalupa through the Atlantic Council. He was the chief tech guy. So they said, come on over. What can you do for us? How can you help us? We have had a breach. And so they said, well, first off, I'm sorry to have to say this so bluntly. Let me try to put this sensitively.
You just let him have it the way it needs to come out.
Seth Rich died. He was assassinated. The night before, he was going to give over some drives that supposedly were the same drives given to WikiLeaks.
Well, think people realized that he was assassinated.
Okay, well, Donna Brazil said the Russians did it, and she kept her
No.
curtains closed because she was sure the Russian snipers were going to shoot her.
All indication points to MS-13, and somebody told him to go out there and...
Andrew McCabe let the MS-13 guys who were accused of killing him out of jail a few days beforehand. So Andrew McCabe is as dirty as possible. Let's go back to Laura Ingraham talking to Carter Page, where they said Department of Defense and the Board of Broadcasting Governors. He's suing them because they broadcast that he was a Russian spy. He's also suing Yahoo News because they used Christopher Steele's own story, which Christopher Steele leaked, that said that he went to Russia to make the connection for the Trump team, basically, and talked with Rosneft. Well, that was a Christopher Steele Comey spy who leaked it to Yahoo News, and this is known by Carter Page, so he sees an in. He sees that he can sue not only the government, and yeah, right, but he pointed out in 2013, the National Defense Authorization Act allows propaganda to happen through the Board of Broadcasting Governors. So he was point on with that, but he said he's going after Yahoo News also. So, Betsy, I was going to make a list of the Comey spies, and it wouldn't just be Dmitry Alperovitch. It would then also be James Comey. It would be Andrew McCabe. It would be what we called the Comey bunk buddies, which we now know from the Nunes memo. But then, of course, we're going to add Carter Page, because we now know that he worked as an agent, paid agent of the FBI, and it was all fake, his connection to the Trump team. Then we're going to add Felix Sater, and then we're going to add Franklin Furor, and then we're going to add Christopher Steele. And then after that, it becomes sheer mayhem, because after Trump gets elected, it is no longer an opposition campaign where Hillary Clinton just dominated Washington, D.C. as her agents and used, everything from Eric Schmidt's Google to Dude Zuckerberg's Facebook to everything else for her advantage, the Department of Justice, CIA, the FBI, everything. It was all geared up for her to take over.
Plus
and
illegal
when it failed,
aliens voting because we don't have good ID laws.
That's right.
I mean, really, everything, and she lost. Talk about the biggest loser.
And that's because why they left such a huge trail, because they couldn't have imagined that she would lose, because it was all set up. So Trump is the disruptive factor. He is the wrecking ball. He's coming in, he's destroying it. And what he's now doing without hardly doing anything, he said, witch hunt, witch hunt, witch hunt. And now the very people who are doing the witch hunt are the ones revealing themselves. Robert Mueller, his entire team, Andrew Weissman, Brett Brahara. Hello, don't get me started. He's going to be the next head of the FBI or the next head of the Department of Justice. He follows the same exact mold as
Trey
Horowitz.
Gowdy. He's
Trey Gowdy,
out there,
yes.
Looking
Yes.
good, strutting around, thinking maybe he'll be picked for the FBI. He used to be an FBI guy.
But he did say Devin Nunes is a hero, and so
Yeah,
we
he
can look
is.
at that. But
But
I really wonder, did Jeff Sessions, did he take a wrong turn somewhere and he never made it to the Department of Justice?
They may have a special floor for people like that on the State Department.
Well, they did with Hillary. It was
You
called
know?
the seventh floor, and it was all geared up to pay and
Well,
play.
oh, yeah.
Pay for play,
Okay.
So anyway, let's go back. Be real clear. Carter Page was not a Russian spy. Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, was not a Russian spy. Michael Flynn was not a Russian spy. George Papadopoulos, though he was popping Putin's niece, was not a Russian spy. The spies were the exact opposite. They were FBI spies. And Carter Page is not even a good one. Felix Sater, a little bit better. Christopher Steele, that's a standard they use when they need to do mudslinging. You got the real ones right here, folks. You got the Podesta group. You got Fusion GPS. You can't get any more criminal than those two groups. If you look at their bank accounts, you're going to see who the real spies are. You'll be able to track it back, and it won't be Manafort and Gates. So what we wanted to make perfectly clear is Carter Page was not on the Trump team, never was. And to get a dossier that unmasks the Trump team with a domestic 100% proof FISA Title I saying Carter Page is a spy is a lie.